You're standing in front of a mirror. You notice something new lying around your eyes maybe. A crease that wasn't there last month. And then a thought creeps in, I'm getting old. That thought might feel harmless, just a passing observation. But according to researchers at NYU, that moment, and thousands like it, might be doing something unexpected, something physical. Your worry about aging might actually be aging you. In February 2026, researchers published findings from 726 women that challenge everything we assume about the mind-body connection. They found that fearing decline doesn't just feel bad, it shows up in your DNA. Here's what makes the study different. They weren't measuring stress hormones or heart rate. They were measuring something called your epigenetic clock, essentially how fast your cells think you're aging. And for women who worried most about getting older, their cells were aging faster than their birthdays would suggest. The fear was becoming the reality. Before we get into what they found, let's talk about what epigenetic aging actually means. Your DNA doesn't change much throughout your life, but the chemical markers sitting on top of it, those change constantly. These chemical tags, called methyl groups, act like switches. They turn genes on and off, and as we age, these switches accumulate patterns. Predictable patterns. Patterns researchers can now read like a clock. That's what an epigenetic clock does. It looks at the methylation patterns in your cells and estimates your biological age, which can be very different from your chronological age. Someone who's 50 might have cells that look 45, or 55. It depends on lifestyle, genetics, environment, and apparently what's happening in your mind. The NYU study used data from the Midlife in the United States study, known as MIDUS, which has tracked thousands of Americans' physical and psychological health for decades. They focused on 726 women and used two specific epigenetic clocks. The first, called DunedinPACE, measures how fast you're currently aging. Not your total age, but your pace of decline. The second clock, GrimAge2, estimates cumulative biological damage. Think of it as measuring how much wear your body has accumulated over your lifetime. The researchers asked participants about their anxiety regarding aging. Specifically, how worried are you about losing your health, your physical attractiveness, your mental abilities? And here's where it gets interesting. Greater anxiety about growing old was associated with accelerated epigenetic aging as measured by the DunedinPACE clock. But not all types of aging anxiety mattered equally. And this is the part that surprised the researchers. Worrying about declining health had the strongest associations with epigenetic aging. Fear of losing your physical capabilities, of getting sick, of becoming frail, that showed up in the data. But anxiety about declining attractiveness, that wasn't significantly linked to cellular aging. Neither was worry about fertility or reproductive changes. This tells us something important. It's not vanity that ages us. It's not worrying about how we look. It's specifically the fear of declining health, of losing our body's ability to function. That distinction matters because it points towards something specific. Health anxiety, the chronic worry about physical decline, seems to carry a biological cost that other aging fears don't. Now, here's where the study gets more complicated and more honest. The researchers controlled for health behaviors. Things like smoking, alcohol use, exercise habits. And when they accounted for those behaviors, the association between aging anxiety and epigenetic aging decreased and was no longer statistically significant. What does that mean? It suggests the pathway might be behavioral. Your anxiety about aging doesn't directly reprogram your DNA. It changes how you cope, and those coping mechanisms leave biological traces. Think about it. When you're anxious about your health declining, what do? Some people exercise more, eat better, take preventive action. But others cope by avoiding, by numbing, by reaching for the cigarette, the extra drink, the comfort food, the very things that accelerate the aging they fear. The study authors specifically noted that coping mechanisms related to anxiety may contribute to the aging effect. It's not the thought itself, it's what the thought makes you do. This is what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe something will happen, and that belief shapes behaviors that make it happen. The fear becomes the cause. But wait, there's a chicken and egg problem here that we need to address, and the researchers acknowledged it. Does anxiety about aging cause you to age faster? Or do people who are aging faster biologically naturally develop more anxiety about it? If your body is sending you signals, fatigue, aches, slower recovery, you might legitimately have more to worry about. Your anxiety might be responding to something real. This correlation doesn't prove causation, but it does reveal a relationship worth examining. Anxiety and biological aging seem to feed each other in ways we're only beginning to understand. This study focused only on women, which limits what we can generalize. Men may show different patterns, or the same ones. We simply don't know yet. And that's worth remembering whenever a study like this makes headlines. Science is a process, not a verdict. This is one piece of a much larger puzzle. But the puzzle piece we do have is striking. Something about chronic health anxiety, specifically, appears connected to how our cells process time. The connection between psychological states and cellular aging isn't new. Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn spent decades studying how stress affects telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes. Her research showed that chronic psychological stress is associated with shorter telomeres. Shorter telomeres are linked to faster aging and earlier onset of age-related diseases. This NYU study builds on that foundation. But instead of measuring telomeres, it measured epigenetic markers, a different but related way of reading the biological clock. Both approaches tell a similar story. What happens in your mind doesn't stay in your mind. It echoes through your biology in measurable physical ways. And that brings us to the harder question. What do we actually do with this information? First, let's be careful not to turn this into another thing to worry about. If you're someone who fears aging, learning that fear ages you, well, that's a cruel irony that could make things worse. The point isn't to add another fear to the pile, it's to recognize that the worry itself might be the thing worth addressing, not the aging. Consider this. If health anxiety drives unhealthy coping behaviors, then addressing the anxiety directly might be more powerful than any supplement or diet. Therapy, mindfulness, cognitive reframing, these aren't soft options. Research suggests that how you think about aging matters. Studies show that people with more positive views of getting older actually live longer. Not because they're naive, because they're not poisoning themselves with chronic dread. You might also consider where your fears actually come from. Are you responding to real signals from your body? Or are you catastrophizing based on cultural messages about what aging means? We live in a culture that treats aging as failure. Every wrinkle is a problem to solve. Every gray hair is a sign of decline. That narrative seeps in, whether we notice it or not. One approach that may help is focusing on what you can control. Not the inevitable fact of aging, but the modifiable factors: sleep, movement, connection, purpose. These are guaranteed protections, but they shift your attention away from dread. And here's something counterintuitive. If you're feeling anxious about health decline, you might actually be healthier than you think. Anxious people often overestimate their risk. The study participants weren't clinically ill. They were ordinary midlife women with ordinary worries. It's the chronic, grinding anxiety that seemed to matter, not occasional concern. Everyone thinks about aging sometimes. That's normal. It's when the thoughts become persistent, intrusive, coloring your daily experience. That's when the body seems to respond. If you find yourself obsessing about decline, caught in loops of health worry that won't quiet down, that's not something to white-knuckle through. Professional support can help interrupt the cycle. Cognitive behavioral therapy, in particular, has strong evidence for treating health anxiety. It helps people distinguish between genuine health signals and the noise of anxious thinking. And remember, this study shows correlation, not destiny. Having anxiety about aging doesn't doom you to accelerated decline. It just means the anxiety itself might be worth addressing. The researchers aren't saying stop worrying or you'll age faster. They're saying pay attention to what your worry does to your behavior. That's where the leverage is. When health anxiety leads to avoidant coping, drinking, smoking, withdrawing, the body feels it. When it leads to proactive coping, exercise, checkups, connection, the body feels that too. If this resonates with you, if you've spent nights catastrophizing about what your body will become, consider treating the anxiety as seriously as you treat any physical symptom. It may help more than you expect. The mind and body aren't separate kingdoms, they're one system, constantly talking to each other. What you tell yourself about aging becomes part of how you age. That's not a burden, it's actually good news, because while you can't stop time, you can change your relationship with it. And that relationship, as this research suggests, matters physically. So the next time you notice a new line in the mirror, try this. Instead of, I'm getting old, maybe try, I'm still here, I'm still becoming. See how that feels in your body. If this kind of research interests you, the places where psychology meets biology, where thoughts become physical, subscribe to the channel. We cover stories like this every week. I'm genuinely curious what you think about this one. Does the mind-body connection surprise you, or does it confirm something you've always felt? Until next time, be gentle with yourself. The research suggests it might matter more than you think.